Hello, my name is LoG, and welcome to another edition of LoG Lessons and Tracks. This track is going to be a pretty simple track in A minor with some dynamic ups and downs, as well as a little bit of a variation in the chord progression. Let's get started by first hearing what this track sounds like. Today's lesson, we will go over the idea of soloing with chord shapes instead of just single notes, which is pretty much what you just heard me do in that solo. There are a couple steps that I think are very valuable, and once you have them all down, you'll have a ton of options at your disposal. If you'd rather not hear me talk about anything for 32 minutes, feel free to click the link above to take you right to the track. And as usual, if you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. And now let's get on to the lesson. So the first step in this process is to always know how every single chord that you're playing around the fretboard is built. So I'm assuming most of you know how to build a standard minor chord. It's simply the first flat 3 and 5 of the corresponding scale played at the same time. But in case you don't know what I mean by that, I'll demonstrate. So let's say here's A minor. All an A minor chord is the first flat 3 and 5 of the corresponding scale played at the same time. So that would look like this. Here's an A minor scale. Standard A minor, that's like a 6-chord minor, so 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. All it is the 1, flat 3, and 5 of that played at the same time. So 1 would be A, flat 3 would be C, 2, flat 3, and then 4, 5 is going to be E. So A, C, and E builds an A minor chord. So however you're playing an A minor, if it's just a plain A minor chord, you're always going to be playing A, C, and E in some order or another. And that's how every single minor chord is built. G minor is simply it's 1, flat 3, and 5 played at the same time. E flat minor is simply it's 1, flat 3, 5 played at the same time. So you don't want to just leave it at that. It's always, of course, good to know how these chords are built structurally, but you also want to know every single location of these notes in every single chord shape that you're playing. So for example, we probably all know that is your standard kind of A minor bar chord shape, but this isn't just a static shape that you want to memorize. You want to memorize what each note is in this chord. So for example, from thickest string to thinnest string, the numbers that I'm playing are 1, 5, 1, flat 3, 5, and 1. Or the actual letters would be A, E, A, C, E, A. So if you can't rattle off the numbers and the notes as fast as I just did, that means you don't really know exactly how these chords are structured. It's great to know that it's 1, 3, 5 and the notes are A, C, E, but if you can't call off where those notes are located in the literal chord shape that you're playing, you don't really know exactly why this chord is structured the way it does. So that's really step one. Take a look at any chord shape that you're playing, anything. It doesn't matter. It could be this one, it could be this one, it could be this one. It doesn't matter which one, and make sure you know the order of the notes. And the fact of the matter is, you won't really have that many permutations or variations. Most of these chords are either going to start with 1 and 5, like I just played right there, or 1 and 3, like if I played it right here. That's 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. That's kind of a more standard, kind of in order way to play the A minor. So there aren't really that many options when you break it down. But again, you just have to know what they are. And if you're wondering, how do I figure that out? I don't know how to figure that out. It's very simple. All you need to do is look at whatever chord you're playing. Let's say this standard A minor like I just played, and then look at the corresponding scale that lives in that area, and then just look at the notes of the chord and stop on those notes when you're playing the scale and figure out what they are. So for example, let's take a look at the first two notes of this A minor. We've got that one and that one, kind of the power chord, right? Well, if I play my scale and stop on all of those notes, I can figure out what numbers they are. So this one, of course, is 1. It's our starting note. The next note is here, my ring finger on the A string. Let me just walk up the scale until I get there. That's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know this chord starts with 1 and 5. How about the next note? Just a string down. What would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So that means the first 3 notes of this chord are 1, 5, 1. So if I keep going, here's the next note. So I'm going to keep going through my scale. 1, 2, 3. So that's 3, which means the order of the chord is 1, 5, 1, 3. And then I keep going. Here's the next note I need to find. So I'm going to play my scale until I get there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a 5. So that means B string of this chord is 5. And then the final note right here, of course, I already know what note this is because I know what note this is. And those are both A's, so both 1s. But let's say I don't know that. I'm going to walk up the whole scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. That's a 1. Now I've got the whole chord. So you might be saying, man, that's a long process to do with all these chords. It is in the beginning, but remember, once you figure it out for the first time, you'll memorize it all. And no matter where you play this chord, it's always in the same order. This minor chord is always 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. If I play it here. If I play it here, G minor, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. If I play it here, D minor, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. Of course, when I say 3, I mean flat 3 because we're talking about minor. But the actual order of the chord never changes. And if you know the order of the notes and how the layout is structured, it is so much easier to kind of create with these shapes. So any shape that you're playing, it doesn't matter what the chord is. Remember, there aren't that many variations, but always know every single letter name of the chord that you're playing, as well as the number designation or the scale degree. Super important because that sets the foundation for pretty much everything we're about to talk about. So with that in mind, if we know how these chords are structured, we can then break them apart into smaller shapes, which is step 2. Being able to take these large chord shapes that you're already playing and breaking them down into smaller versions is unbelievably valuable for a variety of reasons. The first and most obvious reason is it gives you different ways to adapt to the playing situation that you might be in. So let's say if you are a kind of solo acoustic guitar player, maybe you're strumming chords and singing at the same time, these full, chord voicings that nail every register are perfect for you because you're covering all of your bases. You've got low notes, you've got middle notes, you've got high notes, and so it will sound full as you accompany your singing voice. However, if you are in a group, like a bigger group, if you're playing with, let's say, a bass player, you don't necessarily need to play the low notes because the bass player is already doing that. So maybe for you, it might be better to play a voicing that's only the middle and the high notes. And then if you're playing in an even bigger band where you've got a bass player and another guitar player, now you need to really think about what you're doing because maybe the guitar player is playing middle notes, the bass player is playing a low note. Now maybe you only need to play the high notes. And it gets even more apparent if the band gets bigger. So if you have bass player, guitar player, and a keyboard player, you really need to think about how you're going about playing chords. You might not even want to play a chord anymore. Maybe you'll play just like a single note. It's a really important thing to always know or think about how you can fit in the mix or fit in the arrangement to make it sound as good as possible. It's very easy to just autopilot on a chord shape because you like it or because it's comfortable, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily the best choice for the project that you're playing in. Sometimes you might want to play some really cool chord voicing but in the mix, it might be too much. So maybe you should only break it down to like 2 or 3 notes, and then it'll fit perfectly. It's really important to be able to have access to smaller shapes so that you can fit into the mix a little bit better, and so you're not stepping on other players' territory. Like if you're a bass player playing low notes, again, you don't have to do that. If the keyboard player is playing high notes, maybe you should only play middle notes, etc. So that's the easiest, most obvious benefit of having these small chord voicings. But for our purposes here in this lesson, there are some other things that are really valuable. Number one is when you play these small chord voicings, most of the time you have opportunities to add other little things, other little notes to the shapes, mostly because you just have more fingers to do that with. If I'm playing, let's say, an A minor chord right here, I really only have one finger that I can possibly play other notes with, and that's the middle finger. Of course, I could reconfigure the chord to play like this, and now I've got a pinky that I can mess around with, and that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's comfortable to do that. But if I break it down into a smaller shape, maybe just like this one, for example, which is the same chord shape, but just 1, 3, and 5. I don't have the A string the E string or the A string. I'm only playing D string, G string, B string, so just 1, 3, 5 of that chord shape. Now I've got 2 fingers that I can mess around with, add some notes here, add some notes there, and it's physically easier to play. And then even more, if I play just the top 3 strings of this large shape, again, I know the layout of the chord. I know it's 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. So if I just do this, I know I'm only playing 3, 5, 1 of A minor, which is still a full A minor chord, of course, but I have 3 fingers that I can mess around with, add notes, etc. So it just gives you more options to add extra sounds. And again, if you know the order of the chord, adding in those extra sounds is super simple. For example, if I'm playing this chord, and let's say I play this shape right here. I know that's going to work because I have a 1, a 3, and a 5. How do I know that? Because I know the order of the chord. As long as I have 1, 3, and 5, I know I'm playing the full A minor shape, right? So for example, if I'm playing this full chord shape right here, I know the top 3 strings is going to be a full A minor because I'm playing flat 3, 5, 1. If I go to the next set of strings, the D, G, B, I know that's also going to be a full chord because that's 1, 3, 5. If I go to the next string or the next set of strings up, A string, D string, G string, I know that's still 1, 3, 5. It's 5, 1, 3. It's just a different order, but the full chord. However, if I play just the thick strings, E string, A string, D string, that is not the full chord because I don't have 3. This is just 1, 5, and then 1 again. So what I would have to do if I wanted to play a full chord down here is I would have to add in the 3. So maybe I can play 1, 5, and then G string to play the 3, or maybe reconfigure the chord like this, played a different way. So that's if I want the full chord. You don't necessarily have to play with the full chord, but if you want it like that, you always have to make sure you have an instance of 1, an instance of 5, and an instance of 3. And if you know the order of the chord, very easy to do. So let's say I'm playing this 1, 3, 5 shape right here. And I want to add some other notes, some other colors to this. Well, because I know where the notes are, I know what they are, and I know my scale or what options I have to play, very easy for me to add stuff. So for instance, this is 5 right here on the B string. I know I can add in flat 7. Why can I add in flat 7? Because flat 7 is a note that naturally occurs in minor pentatonic, right? 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. There it is, just a whole step back from the root. I also know that it's 3 frets up from 5. It always is. If this is 5, flat 6, normal 6, flat 7. That's always the distance. So if I can see that in my chord, if I see 5, I can say, oh, I can definitely put my pinky down right here and get a flat 7. Extra little color that's pretty smooth because, again, it's part of the pentatonic. So here we go. Minor, add in the pinky. Just a little variation. Nice. I can maybe create like a little melody with that. Something like that. Okay, cool. What other options do I have? On that same string, I can also add in flat 6. Not as smooth of a note, but still part of the scale. So maybe I can do like a little melody with those 2 notes, flat 6 and flat 7. Super easy to do because I have the fingers available to play those chords or to play those notes because I'm playing a small voicing and I have a lot of extra fingers. And I know those notes will work, and I know how to get there because I know this is 5. If that's 5, I can play flat 6, flat 7. If I want to get fancy, I know this is 5, and I know that's 4, back a whole step. So I can even go like this. Something like that, change my fingering a little bit so I have access to this 4 back here. Little slide like that. I also know if this is flat 3, because I know the chord shape, I know 4 is there up a whole step. So I can add that. I also know if this is flat 3, that's 2 back 1 fret from the minor scale. So I can go something like that. Notice I'm changing my fingering every time so I can grab those notes a little bit easier, but it's that simple. If you know the layout of this chord shape, you know all of the other notes nearby that you can add in. And that's how you get a lot of your melodic material when you're playing chords. In fact, I can play this shape right here and pretty much play the full scale based around this. So watch this. I'm going to play this. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. It's a full minor scale, but I'm going to have this chord sort of happening all the time. Check it out. Right? Or I can even do it a different way. Instead of going 1, 2, I can go 1, 2 and get a little bit more dissonance out of it. Like that. That's my full scale that's happening. I'm still trying to hold most of the chord. And how do I know where all those notes are? Because I know the notes in the chord, 1, flat 3, 5, and I know how far away all of the other notes are in relation to these notes. You could do this with a bunch of other stuff. How about this one, the top one right here? This is just flat 3, 5, 1. I've got 3 fingers I can add other notes with, right? I know this is 1 on top, so if that's 1, that's 2, flat 3, right? Just like you're playing a scale, so I can do that in my chord. Flat 7 right here, flat 6, 5, 4, 3. I can even grab like 4 up top if I want to play that. And that's me only playing one chord shape. If I combine a couple of them, right, that's me cycling through this chord shape. That's 3, 5, 1 in order from lowest string to highest string, 1, 3, 5, and then 5, 1, 3. I'm just moving through the small chord voicings that live inside this bigger chord shape that we played from the first part of this. And again, how can I do that? Because I know the order of this chord, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, and I can mix and match the chord shapes however I want, and I know the notes that are nearby. So if I play, for example, this one, I know this is 5, 1, 3. So if this is 5, 1, 3, that's A string, D string, G string. I know 2 is back 1 fret from this 3, so I can go something like that. I can even do something like that. How do I know to do that? How do I know that this note works? Because I know this was 5 from earlier, and I know that's simply 4. So I'm not just like shooting and guessing for notes. I know where they're going to be, and I kind of know what they're going to sound like too. And in the beginning, if you've never done this sort of thing, of course it's going to be difficult because it's new, but once you get it in your hands and get the mindset happening, it's not difficult, and it gives you a lot of freedom to kind of move around and experiment with things. And of course, I'm only doing this in one position. I haven't even talked about moving to the other positions to play the same sorts of sounds, but it would look something like this. Let's say if I'm playing a chord shape like this, 1, flat 3, 5, and then the next one is flat 3, 5, 1. Instead of playing this right here, flat 3, 5, 1, I can play it here. That's flat 3, 5, 1. That's literally the same chord. Same exact thing, but in a different position, which maybe gives me some other options. So I can play something like this. Right? That's me playing normal 1, 3, 5 right here, adding in that little flat 7, using that as a connector to the next shape up top. And how do I know this shape? Where did I get this from? It really comes from this minor chord right here. That's 1, 3, 5, 1. And I'm just playing that shape here instead of here. And I'm getting it from this larger chord shape. So I call this like thinking horizontally about playing chords. If I go like this, that's me thinking vertically. I'm moving this way. Horizontally, you can do the same thing. It's the same exact kind of set of chords, but I'm thinking moving this way, playing on the same sets of strings. It's probably something I'll talk further more about down the road, but yeah, you can experiment with that if you want. And again, as long as you know the order of the notes, you'll have options in regards to other notes you want to play. Like if I'm playing this, I know this is flat 3, 5, 1. I know 2 is right here, always up a whole step from the 1. I know I can do that. If I want to get fancy and maybe add in like normal 7, I can do that because I know that's 1, normal 7 is back a fret. So you can see how important it is to know the fretboard in a way that you can locate all of these notes, pick and choose what sounds you want to play. Now, if you don't know the fretboard, you're I don't want to say you're screwed, but you kind of are, because you really need to know where all this stuff is located, or the layout, because then it's extremely easy. So if you are curious into at least my thought process of learning the fretboard like I'm doing right now, it's a huge topic that I talk about in my Patreon. So again, if you want to check that out, there'll be a link below that you can click and go through some of the material that I have that really targets this exact mindset. So it's super valuable to know the fretboard like this, because you have tons of different options when it comes to creating. So far we've talked about knowing the notes that make up your chord, being able to break it down into smaller pieces, and also add in nearby notes to create different voicings or little melodies, whatever. Little things like that, almost like playing like scales or lines within the chord. That can happen when you understand the note structure. And then the last step, which will kind of take everything we just did and multiply it by 6 or 7, is we're going to go through with the same concepts but hit every other chord in the key. So for step 3, the first thing you have to figure out is what key you are actually in when you are playing whatever it is that you're playing. So if you're playing over a minor chord, let's say A minor, that chord naturally exists in 3 different keys. In the key of C, it exists as a 6 chord. That's by far the most common instance that you'll hear a minor chord. In the key of G, it exists as a 2 chord, and in the key of F, it exists as a 3 chord. So A minor lives naturally in 3 keys, C, G, and F. In this case, for this track that we're playing over here, it's the 6th chord, so we're in the key of C. How do I know that? I can just look at the chords that live in this track. So I have an A minor, C, G, and F. The only key where all of those chords exist is the key of C, right? So I'm playing A minor as a 6 chord. So A minor would be 6, C would be 1, G would be 5, F would be 4. Ridiculously common. Guarantee you've heard these sounds before. And in fact, most of the time, if you are playing in a minor key, the chord that you're emphasizing, that main minor chord, is really the 6th chord of the larger major key that you're in. So with that in mind, let's go through all of the chords that exist in this key. So if A minor, the main sound we're talking about here, is 6, that means C is 1. How did I find that so fast? A minor is 6, B is 7, C is 1. That's always the distance, right? So let's go over all our chords. We have C, D minor is 2, E minor is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A minor 6, B diminished is 7, or half diminished, however you want to call it, and then back to C is our 1. So that is our template of other chord sounds that we can use when we're playing over A minor. Now you might be saying, well, none of those chords are happening. The main chord we're talking about right now is A minor, and that's the point. We're going to play these chords even though they're not happening. It's a concept that I talk about all the time called a pretend chord, where there's one chord happening, A minor, and we're pretending it's something else. We're pretending it's C, we're pretending it's G, D minor, whatever, to achieve different sounds while having a very simple mindset by just thinking about another chord to play. So what chords can we play? Can we play all of them? Technically, yes, you can play all of them, but some of them will naturally be more dissonant than others because of the notes that they have. So without diving too deep into it right now, I'm just simply going to play like an ambient track with just A minor, and I'm going to run every chord in that key with just simple 1, 3, 5. So A minor, B diminished, C major, D minor, E minor, F, G, and then A minor again. And you're going to hear how all of those chords interact over a static A minor sound. And you'll notice some of them are going to be smoother sounding than others. So here we go. A minor, of course that's going to work. B diminished. C major. D minor. E minor. F. G, A minor. So, as you can hear, some of those sounds were smoother than others. Like if I played A minor and then I played C, the C is very smooth on top of that. And there are a couple reasons. The first one, you might say, well, most of the notes are actually in common, right? If we look at A minor and we look at C, both chords have a C, both chords have an E. The only difference is A minor has an A, C has a G. And how far apart are A and G? A whole step. So there's literally a whole step difference between C major and A minor. So a lot of the chords will be very similar to A minor in that way, which will make them sound smoother. But the main reason why certain chords are going to be slightly dissonant sounding over the A minor, it really has to do with one note. In the A minor scale or the A minor sound, there's one note that is more dissonant than the rest, and that is the flat 6, right? So if I play A minor, just your normal minor like a 6 chord, all of those notes will generally flow pretty well with the A minor sound, but the flat 6 is always going to be the most dissonant. The flat 6 is here. Or if I play it up an octave, that note right there, if I play that over A minor, you'll notice that it sounds pretty dissonant, more dissonant than any of the other notes in the scale. So I'll play A minor and sing that note and watch what happens. So, you might be saying, why does that sound so tense? Because the note F, if I play in the chord, F is clashing with E, the 5th of the chord. So here's A, here's E, the 5th of the chord, definitely happening in the chord. When we play a half step up from that, the flat 6, we are playing F. So at the same time, you're hearing this, like that. Notice I'm not saying that this is a bad sound. I'm saying it's dissonant. Dissonant does not mean bad. It just means it's strong, it's tense. So you have to figure out how you want to use it. You might be someone who loves that sound. And if that's the case, play the hell out of all the chords that contain that note. But if you maybe hear it and you think, it's a little too tense for me, use it as simply like a passing tone or a passing chord to bring in a little bit of color and then go back to something a little bit smoother. So yes, in this case, A minor, the flat 6 of that chord is going to be pretty strong, and the flat 6 of that chord in this case is F. So if we look at every chord that we just ran through, all of the chords that have F in it are always going to be a little bit more dissonant than the chords that don't have that F. So check this out. I'm gonna play that backing track one more time. I'm gonna play all the chords that have the F in it. Or actually, I'm gonna run through all the chords and I'll stop on the chords that have the F. Here's A minor. Sounds fine. Here's B diminished. Sounds a little dissonant. Why? There's the F. That's the flat 6 of A minor that we were talking about. C major. Sounds smooth. No F in this chord. Here's D minor. A little more dissonant. Why? Because it's got an F in it right there. That's the flat 6 of A minor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flat 6. There it is. E minor. No F, so it's fairly smooth. F major. It's like a mixture between smooth and not, because we have the 3rd and 5th of F is literally 1 and 3 of A minor. So it's very, very closely related, very much in common, but it does have the F, which brings out that dissonance. G major, pretty smooth, no F in that chord, and then finally back to the A minor. So you can see that most of the chords that had the F in it were slightly dissonant, slightly more dissonant, I should say, than the chords that didn't. So do keep that in mind. This is really just for like a 6-chord minor. For other chords in the key, if you're doing the same concept, some chords might have less chords that are smooth. Some other chords might have more that are smooth. So it really is up to you to use your ear and find the sounds that you like. But that's really the concept. Know what key you're in. Play the main chord at the moment, and then run through every other chord in the key on top of that, see what they sound like, and you can get some really cool options. So once you have all of those in your hands, then you can start applying everything that we just talked about, playing small chord voicings to hit all these chords, and maybe connecting them with little melodies, right? So for example, let's say I want to play, how about A minor, B diminished, and then C, that little cycle. Let's say I want to do that. I can maybe play in a way where there's a little melody on the B string that lets me move between those chords. So how about I go something like this? Do that one more time. Right? That's me just playing a little melody like that, connecting the chords as I'm moving around. And how am I hearing these sounds? How am I picking them out? Because I know the notes that would live on that B string, and I'm just picking and choosing the ones that lock in with the corresponding chords that I'm trying to play at the moment. So if I'm playing like C major to, I don't know, G major, let's say, here's C, here's G, I'm going to connect this note to that note. How am I going to do that? Walk up the scale. Then to A minor. right? I'm thinking about the small little chord shapes and just connecting these chords with little melodies on top. In the beginning, it might be kind of awkward to do this, but as you get better at it, your ear and your intuition are going to see these connections, and it's going to be much easier. But it really does depend on how much time you spend just improvising, moving around. And then once you find some combinations that you like, memorize them. Memorize exactly how they feel, how they move, and you'll have some tools that you can always base your ideas off of. But that's really the concept. Just play chords in the key, move around, try to find some interesting combinations. So if I just mess around a little bit with that, let's see what happens. I'm just going to play, I'll start on A minor. Let's try it. So that's just me moving through some chords, trying to connect little melodies in ways that I think would be cool at the moment. So that's the first thing you can do. Just freely experiment, move around, hit chords however you want. But there's some other tricks that you can do here. One of them is instead of playing every single chord that lives in the key, maybe find like one, or maybe not one, but maybe 2 or 3 chords that sound really good together and just only play those back to back. So for example, if I want to play, let's say over this A minor, this static A minor, I'll play A minor and then I'll play G. Just those 2 back to back. So A minor and then G. And that's all I'm going to play, but I'm not just going to only do it in one position. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play A minor and G, but in every spot moving up. So I'm going to hit every inversion of that chord. So when I do this right here, that's just G, A minor, exactly what I just said. But this chord is 1-3-5 G, 1-3-5 A. But then I'm going to move to 3-5-1 G, 3-5-1 A. And then I'm going to move to 5-1-3 G, 5-1-3 A. So it sounds like I'm playing a lot more chords than I actually am. I'm just really doing 2, but I'm hitting all the inversions. That sounds like this. And again, that's with the little melodies and stuff on top. So if I play over the track. Right? Really simple, and that's mostly just those 2 chords, just A minor and G. You can get a lot of cool sounds out of that. That's a common topic that you've probably heard around the internet called triad pairs. That's pretty much all it is, just a pair of 2 chords, a pair of 2 triads. In this case, I'm playing G and A minor. Easiest way to find triad pairs is just look for 2 chords in the key that sound cool over the chord that you're playing over, mess around with them. So yeah, I'm probably going to do a full lesson on that down the road. But yeah, experiment with these sounds because you can get a lot of really, really great material out of it. So yeah, just to kind of wrap it up, the main things that you always have to know, it's really these 3 steps. Every chord that you're playing, know the literal makeup of the chord. Don't just look at the guitar and say, this is a minor chord, and then say, I have no idea why, it just is because I learned it out of a chart or something. You want to say, this is a minor chord because I'm playing 1-5-1 flat 3-5-1, or I'm playing it up top. This minor chord is 1 flat 3-5-2 5, or something like that. If I flatten my pinky, I'll get an extra 5 up there. You want to know these things because then you can mix and match, create your own sounds. You don't have to look into a chord book to learn a chord. You can just make whatever chord you want. And then the next step is taking all of this knowledge and knowing that even though this is a full A minor, I can break it down into this or that or that or that or that or that or whatever chord shape you want to play. And then you can also start to add in little melodies around things, at changing the voices by adding some other notes like flat 7, 4, whatever sounds you like, and then taking all of this and moving it to every other chord in the key, all of the major chords, all the minor chords that naturally live in the key. And once you start doing that and really messing around with some combinations, you'll get so much material that sounds really cool, and you'll feel a lot more free as you're moving around the fretboard. So hopefully you enjoy this type of stuff. Hopefully all this stuff makes sense. If you like this sort of instructional material and you want to learn the fretboard in the way that I'm describing, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below because I go deep into this exact concept. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. See you in the next one.